friends. Welcome to PT on Ice, the podcast brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. My name is Dustin Jones, your friendly neighborhood therapist. How are you all doing today? So today, it's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's Jerry on Ice. So yes, we finally have a name. Jerry on Ice. Alan Fredendall coined this term, so we appreciate that, Alan. Thank you very much. No longer Older Adult Wednesdays, but Jerry on Ice. And today we're going to be talking about Mr. Rogers, our good friend from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Yinzer. I watched his documentary recently titled, Won't You Be My Neighbor? And I bawled my eyes out for almost the entirety of the film. Really good movie. And if you all didn't know about Mr. Rogers and his legacy, I know my generation and probably the previous couple generations kind of grew up watching Mr. Rogers. But he was from Pittsburgh, and he was performing a public television show from 1968 all the way to 2001. And he passed away, I believe, a few years after that. But he was an incredible man, an incredible story, an incredible film, incredible show, very innovative in what he did and how he did it, but he did it in a very subtle way. And now, 15, 20 years later, they're starting to, do the documentary. Tom Hanks is coming out with the full featured film, kind of highlighting this man's story. But I was watching that movie with my wife last week, and just really made me reflect on what can we learn from this man, as a human being, but also just as a physical therapist, that we care for people. So I think this is something that we should definitely be reflecting on. So a few things I wanted to highlight about Mr. Rogers in that film that really stuck out to me. And I've got a list here written down. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about, but these are the big ones I think we should really focus on. One of Mr. Rogers' strengths of many was that he made the children feel understood. So the kids understood, they knew that they were being listened to by an adult. He had a great way of making sure that those people felt that he was present with them, which is a very important quality that we need to have as healthcare providers. Think about the pressures that we face when we are working with our patients. We've got, maybe 2 or 3 in the waiting room. We've got 5 or 6 notes that we got to get done. It's very easy to not be present with that person in front of you and just type away at your computer. I know I feel that with my patients, and anytime they're not paying attention or looking away, my eyes go right to the computer to kind of chip away at all those notes that we have to do. But we have to fight that urge, or to use it in a very thoughtful manner to where our patients know that we are 100% in that room with them, understanding, listening, and really making sure that they know that they're being cared for. So we have to really fight that urge to just check out and just focus on the computer and not the person, but we need our patients to feel like they're being understood, because I can almost guarantee you in many other healthcare interactions, that's not the case. They may interact with some type of, PA, nurse practitioner, physician. I'm not throwing them under the bus, but it can be very common that those people are in and out in 5 minutes, staring at the computer the whole time. Ask them, how are you feeling? Where's your pain? On the scale of 0 to 10, how does it feel? Things like that. We don't want to be like that. So we want our patients to feel understood, just like Mr. Rogers made sure the kids were understood. He had a great way of using simple language to portray complex concepts or ideas. I mean, if you think about some of the topics that were talked about on that show, they talked about love, they talked about hate, they talked about racism, they talked about war, they talked about just a lot of big issues that they were struggling with in society during that day and age. And he had such a great way to portray those concepts to children in such simple language that they grasp it at their level of understanding. And we can do the same thing with our patients. It's very easy for us to use multi-syllable words, use our medical terminology, say really challenging words to make us feel smart or sound smart, but we actually are doing a disservice to our patients by not speaking in their language. So taking complex ideas such as pain. Pain is not easy. The more we learn about it, the more complex it becomes, but there are ways that we can educate our patients about pain, like hurt does not equal harm, and a lot of these other things that Jeff talks about, especially on the Pain Reframe podcast, that we can use with our patients to portray a very complex idea in a very simple fashion. So using simple language with our patients. Fred Rogers did an amazing job with that. Another interesting thing is that he had this message of wanting to educate children, portray some of these complex issues in the day and age, but he didn't go kind of the traditional route in that era, which would have been radio, that he tried a new and innovative medium to portray some of these messages, which was television. Television was very new back then, but he tried this medium to portray a message. And I think that's very applicable to what you and I do. That we have a message of, we want to improve people's movement, their health, their nutrition, their rest, a lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast. But we may want to consider using mediums that those people are using. So that may mean some of you all that absolutely hate Instagram, for example, if you're trying to reach, in particularly a younger demographic, you should probably be on Instagram to be able to reach those particular people, even if you don't necessarily like Instagram or whatever platform it may be. Fred Rogers, he was known to not enjoy television that much at all. He didn't watch much of it himself and just not a big fan. But he still used that medium because he saw how it was influencing the people he was trying to reach. So think about with your particular demographic that you are trying to serve, where are they? Where do they spend their time? What do they do during the day? And how can you take your message that you feel is important and can influence their life in a positive way? How can you use that particular medium to share that with them? And that may mean changing some things up with how you're currently going about things. Fred Rogers also, he did some pretty controversial episodes. So when JFK was assassinated, during the Vietnam War, when 9/11 happened, he did these episodes that tried to guide the children through these very, very difficult and challenging situations that are really tough to comprehend, even for adults, but let alone for children. And he was acting as the guide. I did an episode a while back about how we need to be guides and not heroes in our patient interactions, and Mr. Rogers was exactly that. He helped navigate very difficult situations for those children in the viewing audience. Now, if we take that to our world, think about a lot of our patients that may have had a new injury, may have had a fall, may have fractured something, may not be able to continue to live in their home, and may have to go to an assisted living facility, or some of these really difficult scenarios that I've often found myself working in. It's a tough situation. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of questions, a lot of fear, a lot of doubts. There's not a lot of hope. But we can step into that situation with those people and help guide them along the way to a point where they want to get to. And we can do that by encouraging them, by showing them what they are able to do, by really challenging them so their body adapts and they can improve their function, all the things that we're really good at. But think about how you can guide your patients through difficult situations. And don't assume just because that person isn't showing distress or anxiety or fear, that doesn't mean that it is not present. I find that a lot, in my work, being in home health. The people, when you take a step back, when you kind of stop looking at the facade that they often put on and just all smiles and, I'm kind of in the South, so people are really good about putting on a face or a front. But if you look at a situation where, let's say, someone recently lost their spouse, they recently had to sell their house that they've been in for 40 years. They moved into an assisted living facility where they don't know anyone in that building, but they're having, 3 meals a day with strangers at this table. That is an incredibly stressful situation. Some people enjoy it, some people don't. But we need to realize that those situations can be very, very challenging for our patients. And we have an opportunity to guide them through that in whatever way we can, based on that situation. So lastly, and probably my favorite with Mr. Rogers, is he truly believed that regardless of your shape, your size, your color, or your age, you were a valuable human being. He got some criticism about this, how he told all the kids that they are special, that you are one of a kind and you are loved, and the critiques came from people, saying that he basically helped raise an entitled generation thinking they're special snowflakes. But there is something very valuable to knowing that you are valuable regardless of what you do, what your career is, what race you are, how much money you make. And he portrayed that very well to the children, that just for the fact that they are a human being, that they are valuable in and of themselves. And I want to relate that to our world of physical therapy, where we often see we put certain populations on a pedestal. Maybe it's an athlete or a professional athlete that we view very, very highly. And then when we think of other people that we serve, like older adults, for example, people with some type of disability, or even young children, we can often kind of put them to the side and say, I don't want to work with them. And sometimes we often put off the sentiment as they're not as good of a patient or fun to work with and whatnot, compared to the high school, collegiate, or professional athlete. And I'm not going to make the claim that people think they're less human or less valuable based on their age or physical ability and whatnot, but we can put off kind of that vibe to where we don't necessarily directly speak to the value of working with an older adult or someone with a particular disability or whatever black sheep it is of our patient population. And Mr. Rogers just does a great job of, regardless of any of those things, those people are valuable and they deserve our service and our skills, and we can offer that to them, and it can be a very fulfilling work. And I want you to think about that with your older adult patients. You may be watching this wanting to check in on Fitness Athlete Fridays or the ortho crowd on Tuesdays, when they get on and show all the sexy techniques and talk about squats and deadlifts and all that fun stuff. That's great, but I want you to really think about that older adult population that we so often kind of put off to the edges and say, they're not worth our time, they're not as fun to work with, they can't do as much as, say, this CrossFitter over here. But really view them as a valuable human being and acknowledge the fact that they've been through this world for decades and have some amazing experiences and wisdom that they've gained, and that we can help them out a lot, but they can help you a lot too with a healthy dose of perspective as well. So human dignity. I love Mr. Rogers for really portraying that, and I feel like we should have a little bit more of that in our PT profession. So I encourage y'all, check out that movie. So it's called Won't You Be My Neighbor? It's a documentary. Tom Hanks is going to have the full-length film. I don't know when that's coming out, but it's in the works. But if you're not familiar with Mr. Rogers, check out that movie, and definitely check out some of the episodes. I mean, it's pretty cool to go back and watch some of those and just see kind of how innovative it was for that time and some of the things that they talked about. So going forward, Modern Management of the Older Adult. So that is our online course that I teach with Christina Previtt. Our next cohort is starting September 23rd. So this is our last week of the current cohort. We're wrapping things up. It's been an awesome group, a lot of interaction. Christine and I have really enjoyed it. We're going to take a little break, and then September 23rd, we're going to be kicking back up for another 8-week course. We're switching up the format a little bit, so check out the link on ptonice.com for more information on that, so you see if you want to sign up. We also have a few live courses in the works for this winter and spring, kind of in the middle of the country, so keep an eye out for that. But all that information will be on ptonice.com. Appreciate y'all. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being my neighbor.